I'm Nicole. I'm here with my colleagues Selim and Robert. We're all a part of and associated with MIT and MIT App Inventor. Really excited to be here. So before we start, while we're still waiting for folks to trickle in, I'll share my screen and I'll paste these two links. So one's a quick questionnaire and the other is just a quick information. Excuse me, I'll paste this in the chat. So let me know if you can't see this link. Want to make sure that your questions stay anonymous. That's why they're two small surveys. And please complete these now before we start. Excited to get going, excited to chat with everyone. Can everyone see these links? Paste it in the chat. I'll paste it again for those who come in a bit. But it would be great if you give me a thumbs up over your chat after you finish. Oh, thanks for giving me a thumbs up about you can see it. That's perfect. Yeah, so it should be pretty quick. Shouldn't take too long, and then we'll get started in a couple of moments. Cool. For those of you who are joining, whoops, sorry, I clicked on one of the forms. We are taking a few moments to fill out a couple of forms. They're really short. They're just for before we start today's workshop, and also a few details about who you are. Oops, okay, sorry. I didn't realize I just technical difficulties. Okay, we're back. All right, let me know if you were able to fill out these forms. Give me a thumbs up as a reaction on the Zoom if you can. Awesome, thank you, Raghav. Awesome, Arjun, thank you. Shravya, thank you, cool. And yeah, if you wanna, thank you, Karima. If you wanna turn on your video, please feel free. No pressure to, it's always great to see people's faces. Oh, requires VPN. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a great point. It is a Google form. Let's see, I'll get back to you on that. Sorry about that. That is a great thing that I didn't really catch earlier. Yes, it probably does require VPN because it's a Google form. If you can't open it in the Google form, don't worry, maybe send me a private message and I'll try to get you something afterwards, the workshop. Okay, super. Okay, great. So do most people feel like they've had some time to fill it out? Should be pretty quick. Takes less than a minute for both of them. I think I'll get started in just a moment. So if you need any more time, now would be the time you can speak up or react. If not, we'll go ahead and get started. Please make sure to do these forms right now. It's a pre-workshop survey, so it'd be great to get you to respond right now before we start the workshop. Any other questions before I start? Okay, I think we're looking good. Cool. All right, so for those of you who just joined, please take a moment to fill out a brief survey. And this is a survey right before the workshop, and then a short answer form about who you are as a participant so we could follow up. And then you might have seen an email from me from DocuSign on consent forms. I will follow up with that too, because I need to send a different one if you're 17 or younger, or 18 or older. So this participant information form would be handy, but I think a lot of you viewed that, so that'd be great. Okay, so yeah, thank you for taking a look at those documents ahead of time. That's just a consent to explaining to you what this workshop is going to be about. All right, so it's 9:08 my time, East Coast time, so I'll get started, right? 8 minutes after the hour. Cool. So today we're talking about going from an idea to a working prototype. And after today's chat, you'll learn all about what we mean about a prototype. We'll talk a lot about design. We'll talk a lot about what we should think about before we start designing your project. So I'm excited to get going in this hour. So like I mentioned, we're from, you probably already have a lot of interactions with Gabby. We're from MIT Solv Ed, from MIT Raise, MIT App Inventor. Raise is a program that my colleagues Selim and Robert and I are a part of. It's an MIT program for responsible AI for social empowerment and education. So we're really excited to welcome everyone. I think we're all a very global group, and it's really exciting to have a chat about design and thinking about users in a very global group. Yeah, so like I mentioned, we're from MIT, Solv Ed, Raise, App Inventor. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Nicole. I'm a grad student at MIT. I really like talking about product and design, and that's part of the research I'm doing right now in grad school. I'm really excited to discuss with you design today. I've been a product manager at a few companies where I did product and design. So a lot of this is very, very applicable to how engineers and product people and designers do design and think about product in companies. Cool. So wanted to briefly talk to you guys about this because I know you've already had a workshop before thinking about problems and finding the best problems. You've had a workshop on understanding users and doing user research. I also discussed this in the form of what we call computational action process. This is something that on the MIT team we talk a lot about, and you're probably familiar with a lot of these concepts already. Today we're going to talk about designing with responsibility, with ethics, with users in mind. And in the next steps of the computational action process are talking about how to make your project into a real thing, how to work with a team, and then how to make it happen in the world, put it out there in the world. So you'll have different workshops that discuss similar things through the Solv Ed program. But also, this process is kind of here for you as a reference. You've already done steps 1 to 2. We're going to talk about the third section today, which is all about designing, prototyping, thinking about how to really put your ideas into a project. Cool. Any questions so far? We're all good? All right. So let's get started. Okay. So a great first question is to kind of step back and think about why should we care about design? Why do you think design is important? There's really no wrong answers here. Would anyone like to give a shout out on why they care about design, why you're here, why you think design is important? Yeah, go ahead, Raghav.
Design is important because it really defines how we interact with everything. Because now with the internet and whatnot, everything is we're relying on whoever's creating the apps and websites to make good designs that we can actually efficiently interact with everything. So when you have like a website with bad design, it lowers the user experience, and you might not get what you want to get out of the product.
Yeah, I love what you mean. Do you have an example where you're thinking about a poor design is worse for user experience on a website?
One example would be like for my school, we do online submissions. So the website that we do on is not it's not very designed. It can lead to it has a lot of issues with it. And since it contains important information, when it messes up and throws an error, it can be pretty impactful on us.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love how you pointed out there's both, design as in, is it intuitive for a user, but also, function too, right? Has to work. The submission form has to work. If it's not working, it can be, can have a really big impact. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing. Selim, did you also go ahead?
Yeah, so first I do think that the former speaker made a great point, but also I like to add something. I think the importance of design is not just limited in temporary times, but also like throughout history and human development. And I'm gonna use, for example, that is the pyramid, the Egyptian pyramid. Yeah, so I would like to say that design is not only for functional uses or intuitive uses, but also it works as an art of expression. It tells people the culture of whether the corporate or even like the whole nation, it tells people that it like a part of the history, yeah, or the feature of the era.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a great point. Design, you kind of talked about history or, really being able to tell a story. Art history is sort of a whole field really discussing that. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And Karimu, would you like to share? You're on mute. I don't know if technical difficulty. You're on mute. Can you unmute?
Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah. For me, I want to share something on that question. Why should we care about the design? For example, for the developing country, they need to care about design because a lot of problems can be solved using the design. For example, social problems which occurs every time in the life, and maybe from the design we can make something more profit for the citizens and the national income. If you design something which solve people problems, it can make money or income in the country and individual. So we need to care about the design because it's a backbone of our life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I really like what you said about design can change people's lives. Maybe it can increase GDP or help the economy of a country. Another point that I want to say is all of these different ideas, right? I think they're all true, and there's many answers, many perspectives on design, and I think everyone here clearly already is kind of aware that design is all around us. It's in our lives, right? It's something that we can use to make an impact and to change other people's lives. So that's a lot of what we'll talk about today. Really, I think you all have already touched on a lot of aspects about responsible design. And you can see there's also really powerful ways design can change others' lives, right? So we'll go through this framework today. Where we first think about some of the ethical and impacts, ethical impacts and also community impacts of design. And then we'll discuss how you can think about taking all this information from users and for your project, how to design what actually will go into your project. And then we'll talk about some of the more kind of tactical tools of design, which include sketching, wireframing, making prototypes. And we'll discuss a bit more about prototypes and how to go from kind of lower fidelity prototypes to really high fidelity prototypes. Now, I understand, of course, you're all here as part of the Solv Ed challenge, and your solution is very open-ended, right? You can design basically many things. We're going to talk today also about a general process that you can use, but also about Some more, maybe if you're making something technical, like an app or website, we're also going to go through some tactical tools. So hopefully this will be very applicable to you, no matter kind of what solution or project you're thinking. Great. So first, to get into the ethical matrix, now you've already thought about users, right? In the previous workshops that you've had, you really discussed problem finding, discussed, empathy, thinking about users with empathy and curiosity. Again, like we're a global group here. You've thought about how, people are all over the globe, and people, as a global, across the world, we have different problems. There's different problems that interest you, and there's different problems that impact people So you've already thought about this. I just wanted to bring this up again because, whoops, let's see, there we go. I think it's really important to remember once more, right, based on kind of the user workshop that you had and talking about user research, we're in this really powerful position of understanding other people's problems, what's affecting them, what's something that drives you and you're really motivated to do something about, and you can actually impact real people, right, with their real issues and real problems. So today we're going to talk about how we can start making our projects and designing them so that they'll create this impact. I want to introduce you to the ethical matrix because this should be pretty directly related to when you talked about users in your last workshop. And this is just a way to summarize some of what you learned, and it's a interesting kind of different take. It could be a very interesting tool for you. So you can see in this matrix, it's pretty simple, right? And it can be bigger than 3 by 3 if you'd like. But we start with 3, but maybe focusing on the 3, top users or groups of users that you found in your research that are affected by the problem you're working on. And then understanding values, right? So understanding what's most important to these users or user groups that you found. So we can do a quick exercise. I'm actually gonna just just looking at the time, I'm gonna skip this and maybe we'll talk through it instead of doing it together. But you can see it's really easy to make this table. And we're gonna go through an example together. And let me know if you have any questions, but basically this will set up, this should set you up so you can make your ethical matrix for your project and your idea. So just to give, an example, right? If we look at the topic of a mental well-being app for teens, as this is the problem we're trying to solve, we want to help teens, think about mental well-being, want to improve mental well-being. Some of the users, right, that have come from user research that this project would apply to might be the teen or the young person who is the direct user. Naturally, we might think about a parent. And then we also might think about ourselves, right? We're making this for users. We're part of the kind of the engineering team or the project team. And then some values that you might consider in this example. Is it effective, right? In other words, does it work? Does the app actually help these users? Is it fun, right? That might be a really important value because the users are teens or young people. And then data privacy is another top thing that comes out through the user research that also, something that is clearly important to users. And then the way to use this ethical matrix is to go ahead and put a check mark in what is most important for each user group. I strongly advise you look back at the user research that you've done and you really think about, really take this, take the evidence from the research to inform your decisions. But you can also make this one for each person on the team and then share afterwards and see, where you thought differently. I think values, these values are generally probably pretty important to everyone. But the really interesting part about ethical matrix is to think about and figure out what is most important to different user groups, right? And then at the end, you have this summary of one aspect of the user research you did. This is easy to compare to other, share with other members of your team and then come to sort of a conclusion of, oh, what are some of the most important values to our users that we want to make sure we think about as we talk about designing. Cool. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions here? I'll share with you so some common users or groups of users you might consider. This of course differs very widely depending on the Solv Ed challenge that you're thinking about and the problem you're trying to solve. But one thing I will mention is to try to think outside the box on who is affected. In your user research, maybe you interviewed a particular group of users, but maybe there's other people who you might not have thought about, including, could be teachers, coaches, policymakers, right? Also remember you're also, have a stake in this project, and also there are different values that are probably matter really strongly to you. Some of the values that we think about a lot of time when we think about technology projects include, data privacy, safety, security, some really, important things to consider. And of course, make sure that you're always referencing back to your user research and thinking about what users told you is important to them. Great. So the impact matrix I also want to introduce is very similar to this, also will help us make the best designs for our project. And the impact matrix, similarly, we think about community users, the top groups of users that came out through user research. And then we want to think about what kind of impact is our project going to potentially make for these user groups. And it could be a positive, it could be a negative impact. And we'll also try to summarize that in a matrix. So wanted to bring your attention to a really cool, actually youth-made app called Moodring. This app is targeting the problem of trying to help improve mental well-being for young people. And the app Moodring, it's a real app. You can also look it up. But it's pretty, pretty simple app to interact with and just checks in. It's like kind of like a journal in an app for young people. It has emojis to react to and how you're feeling every day. And then you can kind of see a history of all the answers you've put in each day into the app. So, when we think about this app, right, this is just an example again, right, but suppose this is your, the problem you want to tackle and the kind of the project and the idea you're thinking about. You could see, in the terms of the groups of people, again, right here on the left, I have, teens or kids or classmates or siblings as a group of users, or as a similar community. We've got parents, teachers, coaches, kind of the adults as another group of users, another community. And then I added in also, young engineer students, so not just us or you making this project, but also other engineers or students in the world who might be inspired by this project. And for the sake of time, I'll skip this activity and just kind of go into some of the ideas, right? Again, this is just an example, but hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of how you can make this useful for your project. Some of the impact that this project and this app can have on these communities is more awareness of mental well-being, right? Can someone think of why this might also have maybe a negative impact? I think it's kind of obvious it could have a positive impact. Is there a reason, like, can someone think of why this might also have a negative implication? So this is something that maybe we might not always think about, but more awareness of mental well-being can also introduce, some of more complicated feelings, right, for a user. Maybe they weren't aware of it before. I think this is just a natural, kind of side of the coin when we talk about mental well-being and mental health. Yeah, thank you for replying over chat. More anxiety. Yeah, it's natural, right? It's not really. I think it's just a natural part of the problem. This is one example of kind of trying to push the envelope, right? Think a little bit outside the box about what is the impact. Maybe there could be a negative impact in something that seems at first glance to be, very, very positive. Similarly, right, more communication about mental well-being means probably in this project, more communication with the app. This potentially could also mean less communication with other people, right? That is another flip side of the impact that this project can have. Empowerment of kids, to either communicate or also to create their own apps, right? Where we're seeing that a lot of times in kind of, this is the overlying, the underlying message of the Solv Ed Youth Challenge. And this is another example because this project was also created by kids. So I just filled this in. Again, this is just an example, but you can kind of see, right? This is a summary of how we think about impact. There might be some aspects of negative impact, also, for different communities. And again, I would strongly encourage you to reference your user research to fill this out. This should also always be, filled out from evidence from talking to users and how they think about the problem, how they approach the problem. And then all of these summaries will help us in talking next, which is about design and making your project. Cool, so brief check-in. If my computer will go, there we go. Any questions so far? How does the pace feel? Are we all excited to talk about design? So one of the important reasons why we really spend a lot of time talking about users is really because we will design our project really based strongly on user feedback and what we learn from users, right? You're designing a project for a real problem for real users, so it's important to synthesize the research that you did and have it in summaries so you can reference it. Great, okay, so I got a thumbs up, sounds good. So let's move on. Oops, okay, there we go. Cool, so talking about designing features, right? Or in other words, how do you decide what should be in your project? Okay, so these slides will be made available to you for you to reference. Let me know as we talk through this if you have any questions. I know this is a lot of text, but this is a bit more as a guideline to remember as you're going through and designing. The number one thing that we just talked about is taking key takeaways from what you learned from your users and summarizing it so that you and your team can discuss, okay, now that we learned the biggest problems our users have, their biggest needs, what can we make that will address that and make the biggest impact? Now, a really helpful thing to think about when you're thinking about how to design your project is what is need to have, right? What is absolutely necessary in the project, in the solution I'm designing to address this problem? And then what are nice to have, right? What would be really nice to include for maybe user experience? Or earlier when we talked about design, right? Someone gave the example of it looking nice, it being intuitive. What does it need to do to work? That might be a need to have. What does it need to have, or what should it be in order to be responsive and intuitive? That might be a nice to have, that might be a need to have. This will depend on your project. This is a great way though to break out the ideas that you have for what to build. And then we're going to talk about prioritizing. So again, this will be made available to you so you can use this tool. You're going to make a copy of this and feel free to use this as a reference. Use it if this is helpful to you. This is just a pretty neat way of communicating with your team, especially the design ideas you have for your project, a short description of what it is, right? And then talking about what we just talked about. How absolutely important is it? What kind of impact will it have on the users over here, excuse me? And then also, how long will it take, right? Or in other words, kind of how hard would it be to make this be a part of the project? These are important things to consider, and we call this kind of a importance versus cost matrix, but really what it is to help you in a more kind of formulaic way lay out the ideas you have for your project and help you decide, is this important? Is this hard to do? How do I decide what to add to my project? Cool. And then it'd be a great idea for you and your team to work together to fill that table out, or maybe you want to work separately and then share ideas. And then as you're working together, it's always a great idea to write down the decisions that you're making. Sometimes we call these product requirements doc. It's just a document of what you're building and why. And then also sometimes we call implementation docs, basically like what are the technical aspects of what you're building if you're building something technical like an app or website. Does anyone have any questions on this? So this will be made available to you, so don't worry about trying to copy down all of the text. Right. So we'll talk about now user interfaces, right? So earlier, so just now we kind of talked about a process for thinking about what to include in your project, which is usually pretty important because your project is probably not just user interfaces or not just kind of the visual aspects. But the visual aspect is also really important, right? And why is important? We already talked about this earlier, right? So some awesome feedback from, and answers from people here on, user interfaces should be helpful for users. It should do, what it's meant to do, like with the website submission, homework submission form. I'll just, kind of try to prod us a little bit more. There we go. By saying, as students here mentioned, right, design is all around us, and we also have mentioned good and bad design. You can see here, even in this photo, right, the road has a design and might be hard or easy for users to use. And then there's also, of course, a lot of digital design that we talked about, right? So you might have gone to websites and there's been ad pop-ups, or there's been banners that come up that require you to log in order to view this news article or in order to view a social media page. That over and over again can be frustrating to a user, right? Doesn't necessarily mean it's bad design because it's probably there for a purpose. But this is something to think about, that there's always kind of a mix of these experiences that we're usually having as we interact with, everyday objects around us, as you're, sitting at your computer, sitting at your table, and also digital objects around us, right? So like social media apps would be a great example, or websites and other apps. Again, this will be made available to you, but this is a really fun thing if you're more interested in design and digging in deeper. Dieter Rams is sometimes considered kind of a father of industrial design, and his actually, you can see in this image, his designs for radios, back in the 1950s were actually great inspirations for some of the first designers that were really, strongly involved with Apple and designing an iPod. Maybe some of you don't know what an iPod is now these days. I could update this slide to show maybe iPhone better. Hopefully you remember something about the iPod too. And Dieter Rams, really talked about aspects of good design, right? So again, I'll give this to you just as a reference. We're not going to dig too deeply into this, but I really like it as sort of a reminder. If you're particularly interested in user interfaces and in designing visually, there's some aspects here that I think is great to think about. What does it mean when he says good design is honest? That can mean very different things to different people. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. But then, good design is long lasting. Again, that could mean slightly different things to different people. These are, of course, his ideas, so it's not like, it's the truth. But he has designed some quite long lasting and functional and kind of, intuitively pleasing industrial products. This is something just interesting to think about, and you can reference or feel free to follow this link to read more about him. Okay, so now we'll get into the kind of the core, the meat of designing, interfaces, right? Designing front ends. So we'll talk about going from sketching to wireframing to prototyping. I'm going to take a moment here and just check in with everyone. Does anyone know what the word wireframing means? Any hands, any thoughts? Does anyone know what the word prototype means? Any thoughts here? Maybe we all know it, we just don't want to share. Okay, that's all right. We'll actually discuss in the next couple of slides what both of those words mean. And you probably know what sketch means, right? So a sketch, in terms of design, we generally, oh, someone responded test version. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'll I'll go, oh, sorry, you were responding in the text, in the chat. I see it now. Yes, perfect responses. So I'll just explain through this slide. A sketch, is a great tool to use. We always encourage when you're starting to design to use sketches. And you can see on the left, right? The reason why it's so easy is you're just using, pen and paper or paper and pencil, and you can build, very quickly and very fluidly the exact idea you had in your mind, right? You don't have to worry about dragging and dropping, tools on a website. You're just sketching. It's hand to paper. In the middle here, you see what an example of a wireframe. Again, this is just example. You can see it's an example, and I think Yash responded with a mock-up, which is absolutely correct. There's placeholders for what might be images here or what might be text, right? So we're not really worried about the specific accurate detail, because in an app, it wouldn't be a placeholder. You would actually see text or images. But it really just gives us kind of the idea of what we're trying to get across. So it's a little bit more what we call high fidelity than a sketch, right? Because you can see it's a bit more towards what your real project or app might look like. But it's still easy to change, easy to manipulate. And the reason why we want to keep placeholders in, again, is similar to what we talked about when we just talked about sketches. It's easy to change, and also, really easy to get your idea across without kind of getting bogged down in the details, right? And then on the right-hand side, you can see becoming a bit more of an app that looks more like something you would use. It's still a prototype. It's still got some kind of rough around the edges, but it looks a bit more like an app that you might interact with, right? And this could probably be launched even. So this is, I think someone mentioned earlier, beta version or test version, exactly. So a prototype is something that you want to test, and you might launch this, you might get some user feedback, or you might test it in a, just, with friends, or before you launch it, like someone said, beta version. And again, it just starting to look more and more like your final version of the app or project you want to make. Now, of course, these are just mobile app as examples, but you can use this for any project, right? Whether it's a website or a mobile app, or even like a non-digital project, you can also go from sketching to, prototypes, right? Where you might build something that's rough and then test it and then build something that's more finalized. Cool. Any questions here? We'll go into more detail about each section. Okay, sounds good. So speaking of going into detail about each section, I touched on this a little bit earlier. Does anyone want to give their take on why they feel like sketching is powerful? Does anyone not like sketching? Like personally, I think it's easy to forget to sketch. It's actually quite easy to jump into dragging and dropping elements in kind of app tools or other tools. So I'll just briefly go over this again, right? Sketching is a great way to get your ideas quickly on paper. And part of the reason why, when we talk about design, we really like to start talking about sketching is because of this easy principle called KISS, or keep it simple, silly. And what that really means is starting simple or starting small means you can change it quickly, right? So when you're at the beginning of designing or think about what should be in your project, you might want to have a lot of changes, especially as you talk with team members and figure out, is this working, is this not working? It's easy to actually also test sketch prototypes. We'll see an example of that in a moment. But basically, you can see this is just one example of sketches. You get the idea of what this one app and project idea this person has, but it's really simple, right? All they had to do was take a few moments to put pencil on paper. You don't have to actually, you don't have to code anything, and you can really easily convey your idea with team members or users and get feedback on it. Cool. I'm actually gonna skip over this or actually I'll briefly touch on this, but this is something, just another kind of like fun thing to think about as you're designing, is this idea that things that are small and also on the edges are usually a little harder for users to use. You can also look this up and to learn a bit more about it. But this is just a thing to keep in the back of your head about good design, right? Especially if you're making a website or an app. This is particularly applicable. If you're not making a website or app, don't worry about this. It's just for fun if you're curious and interested. And here's a look at, like how easy it is to test actually paper prototypes or sketches with real people, right? We've used apps or websites. We know what it means, even if it's just on paper. And actually putting it in front of someone in a really enlarged sense can give you a really good idea immediately of what is good, what is maybe not working as well. Maybe you can go back and create another sketch or talk to your team. And again, you've only done paper or pen a pencil or pen on paper, so it's not as much time involved. You can get feedback quickly and then create high fidelity mockups. Cool. Does that make sense to anyone? Any questions? Sound good? Awesome. So we'll talk now about wireframing, and this is where my colleagues will give an introduction to App Inventor as also a great prototyping and wireframing tool, and it's also a great app making tool. There's some other, there we go. There's also some other tools that I'll talk about after the presentation for App Inventor for wireframing. But if you haven't heard of App Inventor, this is a really, really powerful tool for easily making apps. And you don't have to know, much about app making to start out with. And also the mood ring app the example that I showed you earlier was actually made with App Inventor. So it creates really powerful apps that other students have made that then other people have used in the real world. So I'll let Selim and Robert take it away, and I'll stop.
Righty. Greetings, everybody. I'm just going to put a link to the chat, which is our main page, and then I'm going to quickly share my screen. Let me see. I have everything here. Let's see. Okay.
Yes, non-engineering. Oh, sorry to interrupt. I just saw the chat. Yes, non-engineering students can absolutely make apps, and we'll see a demo of how you can get started.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Super. Okay. So what I would like to quickly show you. So if you go to Google and type the word MIT App Inventor, and you'll basically land in this homepage. And there are a lot of interesting things here you could look, such as tutorial, the YR media tutorials that Nicole mentioned a few minutes ago, mood ring, etc., and artificial intelligence projects and so forth. But very important is at the top, there's a Create App button. When you press that button, you will land on a interface that looks like this. You must have a Google account for this. If you don't have a Google account, we have a version of App Inventor where you could anonymously use App Inventor called code.appinventor.mit.edu. You could find that information also on the page. But what I want to do with you guys is a very simple app today. The idea is going to be basically this. We're going to create a password protected page. So the user must enter password. And when the password is entered correctly, what we're going to do is you enter a second page where there is something special or confidential there. I'm just going to put the image of a puppy. So this could be the kind of app that you want to relax in the middle of a busy day. You enter your password, then you see your puppy and you feel good about it. Now, we're going to basically build this app from scratch. So to do that, first what you do is you go to what is called the components palette on the left. And there are all kinds of things that you can drag and drop. So I'm going to start with a label. You see, I'm dragging and dropping it. Then I'm going to drag and drop a password text box. Then I'm going to drag and drop a button. You can organize these components nicely by clicking on the screen component here. And you can see that there's a align horizontal, align vertical option there. So I'm going to just align these nicely. Now, for our text label, I'm just going to give some instructions for the user. So it could be something like enter, enter password. And if it is too small, you could always change some of the properties. So I'm going to make this, I don't know, 30, so it's larger. And then for the text, for the buttons text, I'm going to enter the word submit. So this is kind of like the submit button. Okay. You could really get fancy here. You could change things like for the button, you could change the shape of the button. So let me just quickly find that. So you could make it rounded, for example. You could go to the screen and change the background color to something you like. I don't know, red or green or something like that. I kind of like gray myself. Now, so this is our first page. This is where the user is going to enter their password. Now we're going to add a second screen by pressing this add screen button. By default, it's called screen 2. I'm going to leave it as it is. And on this second screen, what we're going to have is an image component. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the image restricted to 300 by 300 pixels. So it's not too large. And then for the picture source, I'm going to find an image of a puppy that I have on my desktop. So I have the image of a dog right here. I upload that. And then it basically becomes the image. So right now our graphical user interface has been built, but what is missing is the logic. There is nothing that tells right now that if the entered password is correct, you should now move to second screen and show the image of the puppy. So to do that, to give logic and behavior to our components, we go to the blocks button at the very top that you see here. When I click on that, you're going to notice that there are some pre-built blocks such as control blocks with conditionals, logic blocks, math blocks, etc. But in this case, what we need is the component blocks that we have imported. So I have a button, and the logic here is when the button is clicked, if the password entered is correct, we need to move to screen 2. So we're going to have a conditional here, if then. We're going to have a comparator that compares the password text box value. So I'm going to go and find the password text box. And then I'm going to decide randomly some, some password. I just wanted something simple. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to make the password 123. Okay. Now, if this is correct, what I would like to do is I want to open a new screen called screen 2. And again, for that, you go to the controls. And one of the options there is open another screen with screen name. And our screen name here is screen 2. Okay. Now, I believe the logic is all set. And what I am going to try to do, out of curiosity, when I click on this visor, are you able to see the visor? I'm not able to see if it's on the screen. Do you see my visor? Did
no,
you see it?
Selim, I can't see it. We can't see it. You
cannot see that?
No.
Okay. So I might need to unshare and share it again. But what we're going to basically do is we're going to test this. And the way you do that is you go to connect. And then there's an AI companion option there. When you do that, you're going to get basically the QR code. you're going to have a mobile device with what is called AI companion app stored on it. And then you're going to scan this QR code. And when you do that, and let me unshare it so that I can share the visor screen. So let me do that one more time. Let me show you what the visor looks like. Can you see the visor right now?
Perfect, Selim. That's
Super.
right, perfect.
And you see this environment that we have created, and I'm just going to quickly type the password. I believe was 123. I press the submit button, and the puppy appears. Okay, so very simple app, almost silly, but the point is to convince you how easy it is to drag and drop things, build logic. And because of the way this is designed, it is practically impossible to make syntax error, which is normally a big headache for beginning programmers. So this is a really convenient environment for beginning programmers. So I'm going to stop right here. If people have any questions, maybe before Robert and I have a meeting in 5 minutes, maybe some people have, if anybody has questions, you could ask. Otherwise, we should be reachable, and I am going to type my email there for anybody who has any questions. You could also email us. Okay. So I can't see if anybody has any questions or.
I don't see any questions or hands raised, but feel free to shout out or type in. Thank you so much for the demo. I mean, I think for those of you who haven't played around with App Inventor, you might have played around with something, like block programming, like Scratch in the past. But yeah, as you can see, it is very, very quick. And we talked just now about sketching, right? So when we're designing, you want to make sure you have your ideas in a non-app form first and discuss with your team and see if it makes sense. But then when you move it to an app form, if you use something like App Inventor, it's so quick to prototype and you can see it working immediately. And you can also test that with users. Cool. Any questions for Selim and Robert before they have to jump off? Yeah, so if it can be used for creating demo prototype website. Yeah, exactly. So I have a bit more to share about that back in the slides after we jump back. But yeah, you can, as you saw, you can either scan a QR code. There's also a way to see it in the website, in the site with an emulator, and you can basically have anyone test what you've designed. You can also, like you saw Selim do, add logic to it. So it's actually more of a working prototype. So that's going, that's kind of like when you're sketching, you saw screens, right? And people moving through screens. And so you'd slip the screen into a different state. But in this case, the app, you program that in App Inventor. And then the app would be working. You can test that and share that with other users. Does that make sense for the question? Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder if Prosper also might be asking, is there an analogous or equivalent tool that you can think of, Nicole, not related to our work, that is for quickly prototyping websites?
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Yes, websites. Yes, definitely. So actually, I can share my screen again because there are other tools that I have to discuss. Sorry, thank you for that correction. I didn't even see that your question was about websites, Prosper. Cool. So I can move on to that. But before I do, I wanted to ask, are there any other questions on App Inventor? Are the functions of the different blocks included in the tutorial video for easy reference? There are some blocks that will be discussed in the tutorial video, but actually there are a lot of tutorials that are pretty easy that are accessible on the App Inventor website. And depending, Selim mentioned, right, there's also AI tutorials. So depending on the project you want to make, those are actually very accessible and easy to follow. And there's tons of different tutorials, and they will go through the many different blocks that you can use.
And if you Google MIT App Inventor YouTube, you'll come across our website where there are some very beginner level tutorials all the way to actually Nicole had a similar presentation in the summer. We have even that video, so you should be able to find resources.
Oh, here's a juicy question. Can the App Inventor apps be uploaded to Google Play or the App Store? Selim?
So Google Play, the answer is yes. Android apps are definitely displayable and shareable via Google Play. The App Store is a little bit trickier because Apple has much stricter guidelines of what can be published, but we are working on it. Our dev team, this is one of their top priorities, to be able to make iOS apps available and shareable, but not yet.
Great. Yeah, so I will also share at the end Selim's contact again, if for anyone that missed it. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time, Selim and Robert, for joining us for the demo. It was really, really helpful. And yeah, thank you so much.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, so thank you. So we'll continue with our chats about the other wireframes after this. So are there any...
understand the capabilities of MIT App Inventor? We're going to understand the capabilities of MIT App Inventor. We're going to now do a simple project.
Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so as you just saw, there's also the video that I've included in the slides. So we'll share this out for reference. You can see a video of what we just saw Selim demoed live here. So yeah, so to answer the question about websites, there are great tools for website wireframing. You can use Marvel. Marvel is a very similar tool to another tool called Balsamiq, and this is a quick guide on how to get started. You want to choose this tool called Design in Marvel, which will give you this drop down. You can see there's iPhone, Android web, iPad. You could even design projects for Apple TV if that's part of your solution. And you can see right there all these kind of pre-designed components that are helpful for you to just drag and drop. Again, they're filler, right? So they're not quite the end result, but they give you the idea of what the design should look like. Balsamiq is the other tool I mentioned. So both of these tools, have free trials. Unfortunately, they're not free all the way. So, for Balsamiq, it's a free trial for 30 days. For Marvel, if you want to have more than one prototype, you can use a different email. So, I strongly suggest it's very easy to keep on using these tools for free, especially since we're all students here. But as a product, just as a kind of a caveat, they're not always free all the time. But Balsamiq is another great tool, and I actually really love using Balsamiq, mostly because this is a tool that has been around for many years. So if you talk to a designer, in the workplace, they probably have heard of this. Very similar, as you can see, it's again drag and drop. They have components on the top, and then this is a quick final. When I was working in a pinch, and if I was time crunched, I would just use PowerPoints and slides. It's not as powerful sometimes because you have to make your own shapes, right? But in a pinch, if you know what you want to build, and it doesn't require, right, like signing up for an account if you already have a Google account, or if you already have Microsoft PowerPoint, it can work pretty well. Excuse me. So final check-in, any questions? I know that was a lot, and we're at the hour point right now. So I want to give folks the chance to take a short break if you want, or we can move on. All I have remaining are a few student examples, and then a few exercises. I'm happy to stay online if you want to do that here, and I can ask questions, or if you want to take it offline and have the slides for reference too. Any questions right now? How do we feel? Do we feel like a quick break, or would we like to move on? Yeah, Zara, go ahead. Or is it Sarah or Zara?
Zara. Hi.
Zara.
So is the PPT shared with us, the slides?
Yeah, I will share with you. I'll send it to Gabby, and she will share it out with you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and the links that exist in the slides are all clickable, and you can follow those links. Awesome. So I guess I'll just move right along, just in the interest of time. Also for, oh, sorry, I see a question. Oh, sorry. Actually, my apologies. So Prosper, for website mockups. Yeah, I'm sorry. So these I used apps for all of these screenshots that I took, but you can choose a web option, especially easy in Balsamiq, and make a website mockup. Does that help? I can also, maybe when we break out in groups, I can also do a quick demo. If you just go to Balsamiq, if you basically Google Balsamiq, the first thing that you'll see, like these components, oops, sorry. These components up here that you see right now, Android is highlighted. If you just all like the kind of the first default components will all be website components, right? Which is like the normal website stuff, like you might see drop downs or scrollers, like tables, like things like that. Yeah, so thank you, Eliza. Yep. Great. Yeah, so maybe in the end, in the activity, at the end, I can go onto the Balsamiq website and demo this live. It's very easy to use, if that's helpful. I do want to show some interesting student examples from the MIT Future Makers program this summer, which is the program Selim referenced just now, where I taught a similar kind of workshop over the summer. And again, these students are all high school students, and their challenge was actually to make a solution in 2 weeks. So quite a short amount of time. This awesome team, is tackling the problem of a lot of kids with anxiety disorders and autism and having trouble communicating and wanting to build something that's helpful for them. So I'm actually sharing with you their slides in their final presentation here. You can see, they did user research, they did market research, right? So this is something that you've also discussed in your last workshops. And then they came up with these, really, really quick designs, right? So you can see here they wireframed, using very simple tools to kind of get their gist across. They were using AI and machine learning in their project. So they also talked about how they designed this and how they integrated into the project. But I wanted to showcase their mock-up. So they mostly worked on the AI algorithm, so they didn't spend as much time working on the user interface. And in fact, the final project was producing these mock-ups along with the AI algorithms. So it's super powerful, right? Because they didn't actually have to go and create an app. They definitely could have. I mean, 2 weeks is a pretty short amount of time, but you can see they created this to get the gist across of what they were making, and it actually, is pretty easy to understand. So I wanted to show this example to you about what's possible through just designing kind of the wireframes and the front end ideas. Okay, great. I see Prosper saying you'd like to see the demo. I'll get right to the demo when we kind of break out into team workout time. And then a different example, again, this is an AI example. So by no means, you definitely don't have to have AI in your project, right? It depends on the problem you're trying to solve. But this is also made all by high schoolers, and really impressive stuff, right? They tackle the problem of early detection of stroke in older people. And again, they did a lot of user research, got a lot of feedback from real people who might have suffered this or have family members who suffer from stroke. And then to look at what's existing, right? So, and then they created a project based on the problem that they wanted to solve. And this is just a quick demo again of how easy it is, or how
the
impactful.
registration page fast.
Let me
We're in
just again, this is the high schoolers projects, and they were able to make something that's quite impactful in quite a short amount of time. So I just kind of skipped along. They designed this website. So we'll talk about making a website prototype mock-up in just a moment. And then they again designed an ML algorithm to help recognize facial asymmetry, right? So this is pretty specific to the project that they did, but you can see they produced, their algorithm. They made this, pretty simple but effective website. And then right now they're demoing that how their algorithms work, and did not detect signs of facial paralysis or asymmetry in the camera demo that she just showed. Cool. And then they also have resources, right? So again, a pretty simple web page. Okay, I think that's the end of their demo. But it can be very, very, very powerful. And they also had 2 weeks to do this program. So just a kind of inspiration for everyone here. All right, so I'll share these activities. So basically these following activities just goes through what we talked about today in this hour. Before I do that, I can pull up and talk about Balsamiq. Are there any other questions besides wanting to see the website prototype demos? Any questions here? You can feel free to shout out or type. No, does everyone feel good about making their designs, talking about what users need? Yeah. Just out of curiosity, how many here are working individually or in groups? Would it help you to work in a breakout room with groups, or would you like to work individually? Yeah, Zara, go ahead.
Actually, if it microgram projects, but most of us have groups, or most of us have existing projects which we're already working on, so we can use that.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. So that's awesome. So I'll go ahead and share. So with Balsamiq, the cloud tool is probably what you would like to use. So it's balsamiq.cloud. Marvel is marvelapp.com. They're very similar tools. And unfortunately, you do have to sign in or log in or sign up for a free trial. So I'll just, you don't have to write a company email, by the way. You can use any email, but this is just the website, right? So you'll have to fill out this. This is just okay. Name your space. So for your project, whatever your project is called, you can name this space your project. You might have to verify your email. Yeah. So let me do this. Sorry, one moment. Any questions so far? You can feel free to do this too, to follow along on your computer. But unfortunately, you've got to do all this verification and things like that. But hopefully, it's not too big of a hassle for you. So I gotta log in again. Okay, so for Balsamiq, like I mentioned, right, if you're thinking about websites, actually their default is probably going to be website components. And I actually used Balsamiq a lot when I was designing a website for my current research. Sorry, I think someone, okay, cool. If you do have questions though, feel free to unmute. So everyone can see my window here, right, where it says new wireframe 1. I named my space project 1 because I don't have a name for it. You can name it the name of your project. You can see they have a browser window. And then when you click away, when you click on it, you might have some tools. They might give you some tools. So here, for instance, you can name things different things. But this is a browser window, right? You can drag it to however big a size you want to use it. And then you can just start adding components. Again, strongly suggest you start first with a sketch, right? So you're not dragging this kind of without direction, but you have an idea of what you want to build. So I apologize, I'm not really doing that super kind of in the right process right now, but this is just a demo, right? So if you want a checkbox, right, you can put a checkbox here. Probably doesn't make sense to just have a checkbox on a website, but yes, sorry. So let me write down, it's Balsamiq Cloud, or Balsamiq is the tool that I'm demoing right now. But like I said, Marvel is a very, very similar tool. I won't go and sign up with Marvel right now, but in my slides, you will see instructions on how to do that. Very similar tool. Oops, here we go. And then, yes, so I got another message. Oh, whoops, I'm sorry. I did not send that to everyone. Let me send this to everyone. So it looks like another ask for, can we have the demo of the teams? So I have to ask if they will be okay with contact, because these are other student teams. But they were okay with their demo, and they gave permission to have their demo shared in this slideshow. So hopefully they would be okay with that. But regardless, yeah, they were awesome projects, and you can also see their videos on YouTube. So I can paste those videos here. And yes, this session is being recorded, so I think we will share that recording after, in case your connection has been a little choppy. Cool. Any questions about this wireframing website wireframing tool? Does this make sense to everyone? So hopefully this is pretty easy to use. Obviously, this wireframe that I'm making right now is not quite a wireframe, because I don't really have a project that I'm starting from, but you should start with your sketches and your project ideas, and then you can move on to using Balsamiq. Yeah, looks like Rohan, you have a question?
Yes. So good morning, everyone. I have one question that while designing a website or an app, so every time we have to work on the different templates. Suppose in the front of my eyes, there is a template for Windows screen, right? On a PC. So while we are doing this, and when we are finally done with that, so does it supports the iPad on its own automatically, or somehow like that?
Sorry, so are you saying the wireframe, or when you make a working prototype?
While making working prototype.
Right, and whether it'll work on different browsers?
Not browsers, but it will on iPad or small screen like mobiles or like that.
Gotcha. Okay, on different screens. So yeah, that is something. If you're making a website, or I guess it doesn't really matter as much for an app, but if you're making a website, that is something that you'll have to look at when, let me move back to the slides. So that is a technical consideration that you should consider. So, earlier we kind of looked at, if I move back in these slides, I mentioned earlier, as we're designing, you can make a table here, right, to talk about the technical components of your app or your website. And here you'll probably want to look into what we call like responsive websites. You may have heard of that, right? And that is how you can make sure the site you're building will adjust accordingly, whether you're on an iPad or a laptop, etc. Does that make sense? So that is a technical component, which you can see here. You'll probably want to make sure you add that as a reminder to yourself, or then investigate that when you're making your actual site. When you're making a design or wireframe, you're just probably going to assume that it should look on an iPad or otherwise, right? If that makes sense. So for instance, if I jump back to here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, just as a quick note, like when you're making a wireframe, it's easy to make a different look or layout for an iPad or something like that. Sorry, this is not the right one. Might be under iOS. Yeah, here we go. So an iPad, you can also drag this in, right? And then make the website as you would like it to look on an iPad. Cool. Any
I
other-
had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, regarding this particular application you are using in order to design the website, it won't really design the website as such, right? It will just be a blueprint or layout to what the website should look like.
Mm-hmm.
So what exactly should be used in order to actually implement the particular layout for the website?
That's a great question. So depending on your technical interest or ability or the project you're making, you can use a lot of different things. So we saw App Inventor, right? That was for apps. For websites, usually I end up just coding HTML, JavaScript to make a website. If you don't want to do that, or depending on what kind of solution you want to make, you can also look into website makers. So there's a lot of website makers online, WordPress, Wix, those are all tools. It kind of depends on how, I think so. Someone wrote Wix is good. Yep, I agree. Does that make sense? Like there's kind of all sorts of tools that you could use, or you can code it from scratch if you'd like. There's a lot of templates that you can also find online.
Right. Oh yeah, and one last question. I know it's the most appropriate question for this topic, but how long would it take in order to know all the fundamentals for JavaScript in order to actually create a website?
That is a good question. I think that actually kind of depends on what kind of functionality you want to create, if that makes sense.
Right.
So
yeah, to what degree of
I
get it.
I think there's a lot of tutorials, so we don't really talk about it here because in this lesson and workshop, we kind of mostly focus on the design aspects. But there's a lot of tutorials. I also sometimes use this tool called Glitch, which has tutorials in React. It might be a little too advanced, or you can take a look. They have a lot of examples too. But really, I would say it depends on what you're trying to make. If you're not trying to make something too fancy, so like in this demo that I showed right from the team, it's a pretty simple website. You can kind of find these HTML templates on the web and then change it to make your solution. And these are just web pages, so there's not as much JavaScript or React necessary here because you're just going from one web page to another, or maybe playing a video on one web page. But if you want more interaction in your website, you can take a look at writing more JavaScript if you're interested.
Well, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? So I have, so let me paste this, but actually, sorry, before we go, let me just make sure everyone has access and fills out the survey here at the end. Any other questions? So I will share these slides. So please fill out this survey as we wrap up here. Cool. And then, these activities that you see here, so you can still see my screen, right? Go ahead and I'll share the slides with everyone, but basically this is just a walkthrough of what we discussed in the last hour of how you can wireframe and then test your ideas and work with teams. Cool. Any other questions? I think there were a lot of questions on the tools earlier, so there are instructions in here on the tools that we saw, and of course the App Inventor demo, and there's a video here that walks you through App Inventor also. So hopefully that answers everyone's questions on that. Please fill out this survey. So I will share the survey again. Any other questions from folks here? Is there anything we didn't discuss that you have other design or technical questions about?
I would like to view the feedback.
View the feedback?
Yeah.
Sorry, what feedback?
So actually, here actually, I was new to this technology of app making and website making. So it was very much helpful for me actually, and every day we come, because it is the this is the future, right? So every day one new idea pops up into our mind that I can make this app or that app. But now when I go to share my ideas with others, they actually don't understand what I am saying. So now I can try making on this MIT App Inventor and show them like this I want to make. So they will be understanding very better, in a better way.
Awesome.
Thanks, Nicole and MIT. Yeah.
Thank you, Rohan. I'm glad this was helpful. And yeah, remember, yes, you can use a wireframing tool like this or MIT App Inventor. Hopefully it can help you communicate your ideas, like you said. Karimu, did you have something you wanted to share? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I have a question to ask. According to those mockup method that you show us this time, I want to ask you this: if can be they used to design a mockup for a desktop application?
For what application, sorry?
Are they can they be used to design mockup for desktop application?
Desktop, did you say?
Desktop application.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Yeah, you can. So that's actually a good question, because I personally haven't made a desktop application. So I think it's possible. I mean, sorry, just to step back a little bit, when you're designing a desktop application, you can definitely use these tools to design what's in it, if that makes sense, right? So the main components, the kind of surrounding, because like a desktop application, it won't have like a website structure, but it'll be something similar. So you might be able to find that on Balsamiq. I'm personally not quite sure, but yeah, hopefully you can find the components. And then, like I said, if you can't find the components that you want, you can always use what I'm using Google Slides here, or PowerPoint. I think what's most important is that from your sketches, you can find a way to communicate it in a slightly higher fidelity form. But you can also just have sketches if you can't find the time. These tools are all, I just want to, a kind of an ending comment. These are all just tools that are available to help you. But by no means do you have to use it, right, for your project. We kind of want to help you, learn and figure out ways that you can communicate your ideas, but you don't have to use any of these tools. Hopefully you can use something that's most relevant for you. Does that help? Sorry, I don't personally know if these tools specifically are for desktop applications, but I'm sure there do exist if these tools don't. And if not, you can always kind of create your own mock-ups. yeah, does that help? So please fill out the ending survey, and I will, I think, yeah, I'm not sure, Gabby, if you let me know, should we share these slides out via email, or would that be most helpful? I can also
Yeah,
share.
if you share them with me, I will send them out to everyone with the recording of today's session. And I can also send out the post survey again.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. That sounds great. And then I'll also add in all of the links that we've talked about. Cool. Any
Thanks, Selim.
other final questions? Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining, everyone. I hope this was really helpful to you as you design and create your project, and really excited to see what you make for the Solv Ed challenge. Great. I'll stick around for just a bit.